Cool. Well, Neil, thank you for making some time out of your day to come on to the podcast. It's very much appreciated.
No problem.
And it's good to speak to yourself. And we're going to talk about all things music for yourself. We'll obviously talk a bit about the band.
Yeah.
But it's about music for yourself, your influences, learning your instrument, writing, recording, all the good stuff that's involved with being a musician.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the very beginning for yourself, Neil, where were you originally brought up?
Well, I was born in Glasgow, and then my dad was just finishing uni, and he got a job down south working for the power stations in the northeast of England. So when I was about 18 months, I think 2 years, we moved down to sort of the whole northeast area, Middlesbrough, Billingham, and he worked for the power stations. And then after that, ICI, doing some stuff with them. And then we relocated back to Glasgow when I was about 9 or 10.
And when you were younger,
yeah,
were you exposed to music from a young age?
Massively, because mum and dad are very young. So when I was little, I was getting played all these amazing 70s records, like from, folk music through to even early punk stuff, and a lot of classic albums, classic rock, classic prog rock. My mum and dad were into a very wide taste in music, and they still are.
Mm-hmm. And for yourself, what age were you, or do you remember what age you were when you developed your own musical taste, when you discovered bands for yourself that you loved?
There wasn't one definitive period. I think I was always listening and taking stuff on board. I think when I got to 14, 15, I was getting more interested in, weirdly enough, things like Joni Mitchell and Prince and stuff, and I was quite into the Eurythmics. I was into so many different things. I wasn't into the Smiths or any of the really trendy bands. I was more into great records, great songs, poppy commercial stuff, but also those albums that had that element. But then it was also a great record because it had stuff that was a bit off to one side. It wasn't just all commercial.
Yeah. What was the first concert, the first professional concert that you ever attended?
Probably would say it was Big Country at the Barrowlands.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and I went to see them quite a few times. Mark Brzezicki, the drummer, was a massive influence on me personally, and yeah.
Right.
Still is. I still think his playing's very interesting.
And what age were you when you wanted to play the drums, and why the drums? Why not the guitar or the bass? What was it that attracted you to the drums?
No reason to say it was anything other than I just felt that doing stuff with your hands and feet to me just seemed kind of natural. I was tapping on the back of my dad's chair while I was driving.
Yeah.
When I was 3 or 4, I was playing glockenspiel and percussion in primary school. I was really good at that. But we didn't have money to buy a drum kit or go for lessons. We were pretty hard up for quite a while, and then I made kits out of boxes and pans and stuff out of the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then my mum and dad tried to sort of placate me with one of these Yamaha, like 5 little drum pads on a little thing.
Yeah.
And that was kind of okay for a couple of days, but then you're just like, this isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
So I started playing stuff in school on the downtime. In secondary school, we had a really good music teacher, actually, who got us into records like Fleetwood Mac, the Beatles. We'd do some analysis on how they wrote their music, had their melody construction, all that stuff. And I'd go and bang about on those drums that they had. But it wasn't until I was 14, 15 that I'd ended up going, saving up money because I was working by this point and going to a rehearsal room just to go in on my own and play the drums and jam with a couple of guys playing blues and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started, and then very quickly accelerated up to the point by the time I was 17, 18, I was rehearsing 3-4 nights a week, then I met the guys, or the early version of Glass Onion, which then became Travis. And we were just playing all the time, every day, every night, rehearsing, jamming.
So I was going to say, obviously...
And you just...
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say, I know that Travis started... well, depending on what you believe on Google, it says it started in the early 90s, but prior to that, it was Glass Onion, a couple of different lineup changes before it settled on the Travis lineup. Change band name. I didn't realise that you guys were going for as long as you did, because I didn't become aware of the band until late 90s.
Yeah, the stories and the wiki pages are not too inaccurate. I think I got into Glass Onion towards the end, and then we had a female singer. We then decided she wanted to leave, and we then got a couple of different male singers in. And that must have been 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for a year or two in various formats like that. And then I think we decided to re-audition for a new singer. We had a few folk come and try out, and then the funny thing was that at this point we'd all met each other, but we were just in different walks of life or whatever in Glasgow. But we'd usually hang out at some point. We were already hanging out as mates, kind of. But then when I was working in the Horseshoe Bar, Fran came in and said, "Oh, let's do it. Let's set up an audition or whatever." And I kind of set it up for a rehearsal day where we were trying out 2 or 3 hours, but I totally forgot to tell the rest of the guys.
Right.
And then we were about to sort of finish up, and Fran shows up at the last minute, and thankfully he had the sort of gumption to say, "I can do better than those guys, let me try out right now." And we did, and that was it.
What was, it seems so obvious now because you succeeded with the band, but what was plan B for yourself? Because a lot of people have that similar plan A, and it doesn't work out, for whether it be music, whether it be football, whether it be, something else. So what was plan B if plan A didn't work?
There was no plan B.
Was plan B to make plan A work?
I think, I think we used to call it the stupid factor, where you just blindly keep pursuing this plan A and never give up. And we were up and down the country for years touring, or not touring, but gigging, whatever we could do. It was just a constant denial of the potential that it might not work.
Yeah.
So I think plan B was, make plan A work no matter what. And then I suppose the only other option after that, if it didn't work, was plan D, which is plan Dole.
Yeah. But it is amazing though, because that's that kind of attitude is something definitely that you've got when you're a teenager or early 20s. And I think maybe over time, as life becomes a little bit more serious and you get a family and mortgage, a dream like that might sort of disappear. But it's great, obviously, that it worked out. But the funny thing was, I'd messaged you the other day, and it's such a small world, because your first album came out in 1997, called Good Feeling. And I briefly kind of told you this story, that our parents have actually got mutual friends. And I remember this was late 90s, my mum and dad had been to a house party, but at their friend's house, and my dad had got talking to this other couple, especially the guy. The guy was telling them all about how his son was playing in a band, and my dad was like, "Oh, my son plays in a band as well." So they kind of got chatting, and the guy had an album, a CD. Back then, when you had CD, you had a CD, and it turned out it was the first Travis album. So my dad was talking to your dad at a mutual friend's house, and you just think, what are the chances of that? It's such a small world.
It is, serendipity. Yeah, you never know. Things always appear out of nowhere sometimes.
Going back to the band, as I'd said before, I became aware of the band when I was going to college in Glasgow in the late 90s. And your second album came out. Second album was obviously massive for yourselves. There was a lot of big hits that came from that album. And looking back now, it does feel like it captured the time, that moment. Just the sound reminds me of the late 90s in Glasgow. It sounds weird saying that, but that's what it reminds me of when I listen to the songs. But for yourself, looking back, does that seem like a long time ago? Does it seem like yesterday? What's your thoughts when you think back to that kind of time period?
It's been such a hectic and busy time, mostly, actually. We've had a few years where it's been quiet, but we did do the Man Who tour recently. We did the whole record, and it was only a few years ago. It's starting to feel like it was not a long time ago, but it was an early chapter. I think with this being our 10th album, you know, Good Feeling, The Man Who, we've been playing some of those songs again, obviously, recently. It's starting to feel like, yeah, that was like the first Star Wars movie, you know?
Yeah.
That was like a little bit back in the past now, but the music's still there. We still love playing it. When we played some songs off Good Feeling, actually, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
We're playing those songs better than we've ever played them, like, on that record, because we were just seasoned musicians now, and we've got a lot of water under the bridge together.
Yeah.
So going back to those times and playing those songs is actually still a massive privilege. We're very lucky that gave us the opportunity to be where we are now and still making records. And, you know, we've got a European tour coming up and all sorts coming up in the next sort of 6 months. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was a good time.
So as you said, like Travis, the band, has been on the go for a long time now, which is an achievement in itself. What do you think makes Travis, the band, work? And I don't mean in terms of success, but does the band have like a leader, for example, like a band leader with, you know, one person steering the ship and the other guys trusting that person, that they get behind them and back them? What's the sort of band dynamics?
That situation's mostly led by Fran, but if it's what we would say, varying weather patterns, sometimes, especially maybe not in the creative process, any of us, it's usually Fran, but being on the road or being together in certain situations, certain other, you know, other guys in the band, maybe myself, Dougie or Andy, will somehow have the energy to take us into a situation or do something. But creatively, it's usually Fran that's the driving force. He's very much always wanted to sort of be the sort of well of where the songs came from and how maybe we approach the production and playing. But we've also learned to work not just individually, but as a group of 4 with some of the people we've been fortunate to work with, Nigel Godrich, or most recently Tony Hofer. Great engineers as well who know what they want, and you have to do it very quickly because time is money. There's not the money now to spend weeks and weeks in a studio, you know. We cut this record mostly, well, it's pretty much live, but with a lot of production value stuff as well in it. You know, to do an album in 3.5 weeks is pretty, you know, that never used to happen. It used to take months, you know, maybe more to mix it and get it all agreed and finalised and mastered. But, you know, you have to move quickly.
Yeah. And you kind of said there, would I be right in saying Fran is the main sort of songwriter for the band?
Definitely at the moment. I mean, there was a time 2 or 3 records ago where him and Dougie were collaborating and doing stuff. But this last record, Fran was very strong-willed about wanting to be the main writer, and he spent a lot of time getting these songs demoed up and together. And we had a lot of back and forward on emails and, you know, listening to demos and working out what we're all going to do. So it was a very driven process, even a few months before we even went in to record.
And how would Fran present to the rest of the band maybe a skeleton of a song, and then use as a
sketch,
use as a band, work it, and everyone then contributes to make the song a bit better to the final conclusion?
on this record, we all had various bits of input, but the real driving force alongside Fran was Tony Hofer.
Right.
He really wanted to use, for instance, the drums. There's all live drums, and I do a lot of percussion on this record, but there's also a lot of programmed drums, which I'm playing on top of. Tony did a lot of keyboard parts that he created, various guitar effects and stuff like that. I mean, I played some bongos and he put it through a wah-wah pedal, you know, weird things. He came up with some really cool ideas.
Yep.
And that's why he has that sound maybe that people are picking up on it. There's a little bit of early Beck or that kind of thing on some of the tracks on this record or later on the other side of the album. But Tony and the engineers, they brought a lot to the table on this one.
Yep. And obviously...
And you've got to learn to trust those guys and go with it, because what you think you want to do might not actually be the right thing. It's close, but if you just let someone else take it somewhere, it can usually end up having this really fresh thing going on.
Yeah. So having done both, if you had to choose just between writing and recording music or playing live, which one would you pick?
I do love recording. I love the pressure of getting a great take and doing it very well, being super competent. I'm very proud of that when I'm in the studio, but I think my real love is playing live.
Yep.
I'm not so good at sitting about waiting, and there's a lot of waiting around as a drummer. As Charlie Watts said, 95% waiting, 5% perspiration.
Yeah. So see if you had to... You think of all the songs that Travis have recorded over the years. If you sat down with someone that had never heard the band before, see if you had to pick just one song that you think best represents Travis as a band and play it for that person, what song would you pick?
Oh, good question. That's a tough one, but a very good question. Again, that could change from week to week or even day to day. There's a really great song that we never played live, and I remember us doing it in the studio. And when you hear it, either on YouTube or off the record, it sounds so great. It sounds like it's got a really powerful vibe to it. So it's a song called, it's a Dougie song actually, Different Room, and it's on the album Where You Stand, and it's quite a rocky track. And Fran's vocal on it's beautiful. It's just loads of lovely guitars. Dougie's bass is really driving in it. If I was to choose today, that's the one I would play you, because I think it's very, very Travis. I wouldn't not play Driftwood or, Why Does It Always Rain, but I would pick this because it's got a freshness that maybe represents Travis when it was starting out, or, when you're just starting recording a record that's got that excitement about it.
Yeah, and we've obviously been quite technical chit chat for all the musicians that are going to be watching. So what I like to do, Neil, is end things and ask some fun questions for yourself, right?
Yeah.
So imagine that you've got a time machine that you could go back in time anywhere in the world. Big gig, small gig, you choose. What's the one gig that you wish that you could have attended?
Wow. That's really difficult. I mean, I've already thought about 10 just there. Am I allowed two answers?
Go for it, give me two.
I would like to go back to the Isle of Wight Festival 1970. Miles Davis live, phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, all the bands and festivals at that time were brilliant, but that was for me, that's a beautiful piece of jazz music there live. The second one, and people will probably guess this, it would have to be at the Winterland, San Francisco, 1976 for the Last Waltz.
Yeah. Cool. Obviously, you're known for playing drums, percussion. Is there another instrument that you would maybe play?
I play a little bit of keyboards, I dabble, bit of synth and, bits and bods, but yeah, I'm just still maybe I've not tried to broaden my horizons enough, but percussion, programming drum stuff and playing drums I'm still learning. I've got so much to learn, you know.
Yeah.
When I practice, I'm trying to play different patterns, jazz, different types of world music. But it's never ending, you know.
This one might.
I have to work it. I have to work at it. Although I'm very sort of rhythmic, I still need to think about what I want to play and how I'm going to do it. Think about practicing technique. I think it's important that you always remain grounded with those things. I think if you just expect it to appear every day at your fingertips, you shouldn't take for granted, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, always watch other musicians and other bands as well, and because there's always more to learn.
Yeah. See, just with you saying that, you remember back in the 90s, before Travis were signed, were a known band, you're playing all the gigs, King Tut's, all these types of places. And it's basically a battle of the bands. You know, you might be friends with other bands, but you want to be the best band on the night. Is that still the case? Still have that mentality when you play a festival now?
Massively. We're still very competitive. Even on the recent Killers tour, we go on every night to try and, blow the doors off it. And they spotted that straight away. Brandon and Ronnie were like, wow, you guys are phenomenal, absolutely on fire. And it's like, but that's our job, because if we didn't do that, they wouldn't then go on and play a mega show, and they did every night.
Yep.
You've got, they're a competitive bunch as well. You've got to give it 100%, more than that, as if it's your last gig you're ever going to play.
Yep.
That's how we approach every show, pretty much, Now
imagine, Neil, that you've got a dead body in the boot of your car, right?
Right.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning, you need to dispose of this body, no questions asked. Which member of Trump
Right.
are you going to help you, and why?
Good question. Probably Andy or Dougie, because they're very practical. They would come up with a solution that would cover the odour and provide some form of discreet removal.
That's fair enough. We don't need to talk any more about that. That's fine. And, as you know yourself, Neil, over the years, millions and millions of amazing songs have been recorded by different artists. What's the one song that you wish you'd have sat in the recording studio to witness the band actually recording it?
This is for the vocal. I'm quite a big Fleetwood Mac fan, not of everything, but there's a song on the album Tusk, and Stevie Nicks' vocal is so fragile. She was obviously going through a tough time.
Yep.
The song is called Storms. Yeah, Storms on Tusk. The recording engineer Ken Dashut, he made Mick Fleetwood play certain types of brushes and stuff on it, and he would put microphones in weird places around the kit. It's got a really interesting sound, and how Lindsey Buckingham did the guitar parts and everything. But Stevie Nicks' vocal is out of this world. It's stunning. If I was to have a second choice, it would be a song by Joni Mitchell on Hejira called Song for Sharon. It's got some of the most amazing drumming by her then husband John Guerin, and also Jaco Pastorius' bass parts are unbelievable, otherworldly, cosmic, and it's an amazing song. It's a 7-minute epic story about Joni and some of her female friends and the different walks of life they were all involved in at that time. It's a very powerful song.
Cool.
That's my two choices. I know you said one, but I'm giving you two again.
That's fine. And last question for you, Neil. For yourself, who is your Mount Rushmore for bands or musicians?
Oh. I've got an old friend from back in the day. We used to have a flat together when I first, moved out and got one place in Glasgow. And he's very successful businessman now, a guy called David Campbell.
Right.
And he turned me on to so many great records. David used to play bass very briefly in the Trash Can Sinatras, and then he finished uni and ended up getting into property and development of accommodation and stuff, and he now runs a big business doing that. But he has always been a torchbearer of new music, not necessarily that pretentious cool thing that everyone tries to be sometimes. He always found interesting stuff. It could be classical, jazz, funk, or new indie music, but indie music that was really quite good, not just trying to be on the bandwagon with everyone else. He's definitely a Mount Rushmore of musical taste.
Yeah. Have you got any other choices, bands or musicians?
There's not really. I mean, the bands that we've played with that still really blow me away. It's hard to say. Definitely the Killers. They've got a really special thing going on as well. They're a brotherhood too, and they're great players. They've got a great energy. Individual musicians, there's too many to list. Really, a lot of jazz guys, a lot of folk people. Drummers, that's really impossible because that changes again day to day.
So many.
There's so many great players. I mean, I love Ringo, I love Charlie, but I love all the jazz guys. I love the fusion guys. I love Will Calhoun. He was a drummer for Living Colour.
Yeah.
I like all sorts of stuff. I'm very reticent to pin it down on any one day to one thing. It's difficult.
That's fine, Neil. Well, Neil, that's us done there. So thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, getting to pick your brain a wee bit about what makes you tick with regard to music, and obviously look forward to seeing what comes in the future for yourself and for Travis.
Thank you.
But thank you for coming on, and until next time, Neil. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, man.